We're talking about a decade-long storm, but a storm made of dust. It buried entire homes, it choked the life out of the land, and it drove millions of people from their farms. So let's get into it. This is the story of one of America's greatest and, frankly, most terrifying ecological disasters, the Dust Bowl. Just try to picture that for a second. You look out your window and you see a cloud coming, but it's not a rain cloud. It's a rolling, boiling wall of black dirt, and it's coming right for you. That quote from a Kansas farmer named Lawrence Svobida, it just perfectly captures the sheer terror of what it was like. Yeah, they had a name for them, black blizzards. And these weren't just some dusty winds. We're talking about storms carrying so much static electricity they could short out your car engine or literally knock you off your feet. Inside one of these things, daylight just vanished, and the air became thick with the very ground you were supposed to be farming. And the name for the whole era? The Dust Bowl? Well, that actually came from one specific day, the day the absolute worst storm of them all hit. An AP reporter got caught in it, and when his editor read the story, he coined the phrase that would define the entire decade. 3 feet. That's it. That's how far you could see when one of these storms rolled in. I mean, think about that. Not yards, not even the length of a car, just 3 feet. People would tie ropes from their back door to the barn just so they wouldn't get lost. It was total darkness in the middle of the day, made from the earth itself. So you have to be asking, how on earth does something like this even happen? Well, this wasn't just some random act of nature. It was more like a recipe for disaster, a perfect storm created by a combination of human choices and environmental reality. You can see it building for almost 70 years. First, the Homestead Act brings waves of settlers to the plains. Then, World War I hits, and the demand for wheat goes through the roof. Farmers are basically told wheat will win the war. Then come the new gasoline tractors, letting them plow up millions of acres like never before. And right at the peak of all this, the final ingredient gets added, a brutal, decade-long drought. And underneath it all was this fundamental misunderstanding. See, there was this popular but totally wrong idea that rain follows the plow, that the very act of farming would magically make it rain more. But the reality was, this place had long been known as the Great American Desert. It's a semi-arid region. It's supposed to have long droughts. The belief was a fantasy, but the reality was about to hit hard. And this was probably the single biggest mistake. For thousands of years, the Great Plains were covered in these amazing native grasses with incredibly deep roots. That root system was nature's anchor. It held the soil together and kept moisture locked in, even with the high winds. But to plant wheat, you had to plow it all up. So with that natural anchor gone, years and years of plowing with heavy machines just pulverized the soil. It broke down its structure, turning what was once rich topsoil into a fine, light powder. It was just sitting there, completely vulnerable, waiting for a little wind. And then the rain stopped. That was it. The final line of defense was gone. The loose, pulverized soil, baked in the sun, totally exposed to the relentless winds that sweep across the plains. So the recipe for disaster was complete, and the result was an ecological collapse with brutal consequences, not just for the land, but for the millions of people who called it home. 2.5 million. Let that number sink in. That's how many people were forced to move out of the Plains states by 1940. It is still the largest migration in all of American history, and it all happened in about 10 years. An entire population literally blown away by the dust. And behind that huge number are millions of individual stories of just absolute desperation. The famous photographer Dorothea Lange captured this moment. Her caption says it all. Broke, baby sick, and car trouble. It's the human face of a catastrophe right there in one heartbreaking sentence. And the dust? It wasn't just burying farms, it was a killer. People started getting this thing they called dust pneumonia from breathing in all those fine particles. It was often fatal. Animals were found suffocated in the fields, their stomachs packed with inches of dirt. It was a full-blown public health nightmare. The economic hit was just as staggering. By 1936, the country was losing about $25 million a day because of the Dust Bowl. In today's money, that's over $500 million every single day. And remember, this was all happening during the Great Depression. So when you're facing a crisis this massive, you have to do something. The country mobilized in a way it never had before, leading to huge government-led efforts to save the land and its people. It was an all-out war against the dirt. The government started teaching farmers a whole new way of doing things that are actually standard practice today. Things like contour plowing to stop erosion, planting different crops in alternating strips, and building terraces on hillsides to hold on to water. And crucially, planting massive rows of trees called shelter belts to break the wind. It was like a crash course in sustainable agriculture for an entire region. And the scale of this was just immense. The Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, planted over 200 million trees. They created a 100-mile-wide belt of trees that stretched all the way from Canada down to Texas. They were literally building a green wall to protect the plains. The disaster also burned its way into American culture. John Steinbeck's masterpiece, The Grapes of Wrath, told the story of the displaced Okie families heading west to California. His book took what was happening out on the plains and made it a national story of struggle and resilience. And if Steinbeck wrote the book on the Dust Bowl, Woody Guthrie wrote the soundtrack. His Dust Bowl ballads give a voice to the migrants themselves. He traveled with them, he listened to their stories, and he put them to music, becoming known as the Dust Bowl troubadour. So what happened after the rains finally came back around 1939? What was left? What did America learn from this whole devastating decade? Well, the legacy of the Dust Bowl is still written in the soil today. For one thing, the economic damage was permanent. You can see it right here. By 1940, farmland value in the hardest-hit counties had dropped by almost 30%. And in many of those places, the land never fully recovered. Those are deep, lasting scars. But there was a positive side, if you can call it that. The Dust Bowl completely changed how America thought about its land. It led directly to the creation of the Soil Conservation Service and really gave birth to the modern conservation movement. It was the first time the country officially said, hey, maybe soil isn't an infinite resource. Maybe we need to protect it. And that all brings us to the big, final question. A historian named Donald Worster asked it best. He saw modern farming on the plains with giant machines and massive irrigation, and he wondered, have we really learned our lesson? Or are we just using more powerful technology to make the same basic mistakes, just on a grander scale? It's a powerful question, and a lesson written in dust that we're still trying to figure out today.